Well, let's come back to the cholesterol piece. You
Okay,
got into it, but I want a bit more detail there.
sure.
It sounded like increased stress creates more oxygen. The cholesterol is a sink for that.
Right.
And then we make more cholesterol as a result. Do I have that right?
Yeah. So you do. 1973, Leslie Clavet, it's actually a guy. He's got his MD at University of Wisconsin, uh, and he became a cardiologist. And then he went to a little school in Boston called Harvard to get his doctorate in science, and he focused on copper research. So he has this unique combination of cardiology and copper. 1973, um, he decides to test this concept of could lack of copper be causing a rise of cholesterol? Again, you must have copper to activate oxygen, to make water, to release energy. That's the critical chemical reaction. And lo and behold, what he was able to prove in 1973 is that lack of copper causes a rise in cholesterol. Now, for that finding to become science, one other lab needed to confirm his findings. Since then, over 30 labs have confirmed that Dr. Clavet was right, that lack of copper causes a rise in cholesterol. And it's obviously not well regarded within big pharma, but that is the actual mechanism. And um, even I think the other misunderstanding is that as we get older, we actually need more cholesterol. And that was one of the real important findings from the Framingham study back in the 70s and 80s and maybe even 90s. Um, in fact, I think it was Scarpelli. I think Dr. Scarpelli, who was the third director, he was on record for saying that the most important finding was that as the subjects got older, the more cholesterol they had, the healthier they were, which is in complete conflict with the cholesterol causes heart disease, which was started obviously by Ansel Keys and his clever thinking. And so that was in 1955, I guess, was when that was at its peak, right after Eisenhower had his first heart attack. And it took until 2016 for Raznikov and Diamond to say, stop it. Cholesterol is not the cause of heart disease. And so we were held in hostage for 60 years, which is unfortunate. But the importance of cholesterol is legendary, not just for the membrane structure and function, but for just the chemical process of making complicated chemicals are very reliant on that. And so it's a gross misunderstanding of cholesterol's role in our biological system.
To go a bit deeper into this piece of too much oxygen,
Yeah.
is that because without copper, the mitochondria can't use that to make energy? And then the body has to deal with that by mopping it up with the cholesterol?
Yeah. I think that's a reasonable way of looking at it. That I think one of the greatest mysteries of physiology is that they don't know how oxygen gets into the mitochondria, which is like, seriously? And so the closest they've come is Wittenberg, 2007, husband and wife team, and they threw up their hands and they couldn't figure it out. So no one really knows how the oxygen is actually getting inside the mitochondria, which is fascinating. Um, my son has a PhD from Stanford in biochemistry. He's no chimp. And I asked him, I said, so how does oxygen get into the mitochondria? He said, oh, it's passive diffusion, Dad. I went, well, bullshit. He said, yeah, you're right. I just wanted to see what you knew. It's like, okay, thank you. Pass that test. But again, we're talking about the second most reactive element. They don't know how it gets inside the mitochondria, which is absolutely fascinating. But once it's inside the mitochondria, it needs to be chaperoned. And and it needs to be made into water, which is happening in complex 4, cytochrome C oxidase, so that the energy precursor molecules, ADP, can go over to complex 5, ATP synthase. That rotor is spinning 30,000 revolutions per minute. That's 500 revolutions per second. Try to do a pirouette in 1 second, right? But it's going 500 revolutions per second. And every time it completes the cycle, it makes 3 ATP. Where does that actually happen? Where is the ADP becoming ATP? It's at the beta subcomplex. It's copper dependent. And so that's why I'm kind of gaga about copper in the mitochondria. And people don't know of the work of Auburn University. But anyway, 50,000 atoms of copper, 50,000 atoms of copper in the mitochondrial matrix. And that was borne out in 2004 and 2006. In 2005, there's a research team out of St. Petersburg, Russia, headed up by Ludmila Lutsenko. And she identified that the copper ligand that's keeping track of the copper in the matrix is ceruloplasmin. Oh, wow, that's pretty significant. So most doctors don't know what ceruloplasmin is. Oh, yeah, it's something to do with Wilson's disease. That's how far they'll go. But they don't know that ceruloplasmin is actually monitoring the status of copper inside the mitochondria. Like, that's, to me, that's one of the most mind-numbing facts that nobody knows about. And so the whole infrastructure of the mitochondria, and there's a modest 40 quadrillion in our body, that's 15 zeros. People have this image going back to high school biology. They look at the picture of the cell, and it had 2 or 3 mitochondria. What they don't realize is that picture was drawn by Walt Disney, has nothing to do with reality, and the average cell has 500 mitochondria. The average mast cell, 1,000 mitochondria. The average liver cell, 2,000 mitochondria. Kidney cell, 4,000 mitochondria. Heart cell, 10,000 mitochondria. Mature egg in a woman's body, supposed to have 600,000 mitochondria. And it can go down to 100,000. Oh, maybe that's the basis of PMS, possibly, and all of the related conditions. And then there are neurons. There are brain centers in our body, particularly like the substantia nigra. 2 million mitochondria per neuron. Well, there's 980,000 neurons in the substantia nigra. And do you know what the formal clinical definition of Parkinson's is? When 66% of those neurons are dead. That's a lot of mitochondria that fell off the wagon. And so when you begin to put it in this energy paradigm, you have a very different perspective of what's causing imbalance and what's it going to take to create balance and homeostasis. And so I think it's important to ground our understanding in these details so we have a rich appreciation for the sophistication of Mother Nature and the design that went into our body. So that's just me being kind of a nudge about it. But I think it's important to get that level of understanding into the thinking of practitioners, especially. Because it's not, they've been trained to think if this and that. But if you ask them, why is my vitamin D low? Or why is my cholesterol high? I don't know that they could give you a really good answer. And what's fascinating, Jesse, is how did the nation, think about this, how did the nation that has the highest cholesterol end up with the lowest vitamin D on the planet? Now that's a conundrum. And it's a metabolic conundrum, and it has nothing to do with sunlight. has nothing to do with sunlight. And so people don't stop and say, wait a minute, but don't you make vitamin D from cholesterol? Yes, you do. That's good to know. But no one stopped to say, well, then how do we go from having the highest cholesterol to the lowest vitamin D?
Well, you got to tell us why.
It has to do with minerals. When you withhold copper from an animal's diet, iron fills up in the liver. That was first documented in March of 1928 at the University of Wisconsin, in May of 1928 at the University of Kentucky. Dr. Hart at Madison, Dr. McHarg at University of Kentucky. When the iron starts to fill up in the liver, the liver is really designed to store copper and retinol. That was its original intent. That was the original design. Now they've turned it into an iron depot. But as the iron builds up in the liver, it causes oxidative stress. It's axiomatic. Who's the first to go under oxidative stress? It's magnesium. I studied that for like 7 years, this relationship between oxidative stress and magnesium loss, and coined the phrase magnesium burn rate as a result of that, as an indication of the level of oxidative stress in your body. And so copper's down, iron's up, iron's creating oxidative stress, magnesium loss. The enzyme to make storage vitamin D requires magnesium. Ding, ding, ding. And that's a good thing to know. And then the enzyme to make active vitamin D requires magnesium. Ding, ding, ding. And so if you've got a lot of oxidative stress, you're going to have dysfunctional vitamin D metabolism. And what is critical to make copper bioavailable? Oh, you have to have vitamin A in your diet. And what blocks vitamin A uptake? Taking synthetic vitamin D at the yin yang, because you're afraid of your numbers. And so that's the distortion that we're living with, is these workaround supplementation programs, because people have lost sight of the physiology that runs the body.
If you enjoyed that clip, you're going to want to head over here and catch the full episode. I'll see you over there.
The practical basis of the protocol is to get people to realize that it's a three-ring circus that runs life on planet Earth: copper, iron, and oxygen. And if they don't play well together, you're going to have oxidative stress.